Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to take this hour on a Wednesday morning to show you a better and more intuitive way to manage information. My name is Joanna Sobran, and I'm the CEO here at MXO Tech. I personally wanted to partner with an innovative company to bring more efficiency and productivity to our clients and just overall our community. Every day I talk to clients and I hear people saying how they're wasting time searching for documents, not having streamlined employee onboarding, and still relying on manual and paper processes. So I wanted to cover a few topics. This particular solution offers a lot of different capabilities, but today we're going to focus on the creation and management of standard operating procedures using formalized workflows and approvals and document release, so everyone in your organization is rowing in the same direction. We're going to cover training and HR management related to SOPs for new and existing employees, and auditing and tracking to help with risk management and compliance. So before we get started, there's a few housekeeping rules. We have everyone on mute, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box located in the screen. We've left enough time to address any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. And then, of course, afterwards, you can talk to us directly and request a demo or a trial. All right. Real quick here, I'd like to introduce Mike Dalrymple and Chris Bradford. This team today, they're going to focus on specific features on Mfiles, but as you'll quickly learn, Mfiles is an incredible, powerful solution and has a long list of capabilities, which will go in more depth at the webinar. Actually, before I let Michael and Chris get started, a little bit about MXO Tech. First, I wanted to tell you that, we partner with Mfiles for this specific platform because they just do an incredible job and really have an innovative product. But MXO offers a lot of different capabilities. We're a full suite of technology services company. We're located here in the West Loop. We work with clients for outsourced IT support, security compliance, custom business application development, and system integrations. When I started the company, I really had a passion for using technology, allowing other businesses to use technology to innovate, stand out from their competitors, and grow their businesses. Oftentimes, people are struggling because they're still using a lot of paper and manual processes, and these are the type of technologies that you can implement in your business to really save on a lot of time and allow you to grow and focus on the business that you are managing. So without further ado, I'm going to have Michael Dalrymple take over, and he's going to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Joanna. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let me know when you see it. Let's see. Can everyone see my mouse moving?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I am on the right screen. Okay, excellent. So as Joanna had mentioned, we are going to be talking about content chaos and what that means. And so as she had mentioned, my name is Michael Dalrymple. I am the channel account manager for Mfiles. And joining with me is Chris Bradford, who is the solution engineer. And what we will be doing today is kind of highlighting the Mfiles platform specifically and kind of talk about how our system can help with the content chaos in the manufacturing industry, and we can help companies stay compliant. We will have two parts of this presentation, one being a slide presentation in the very beginning and then also a demo split into two parts. One focused in on general document management and showcasing part of our QMS and compliance. So the first thing I would like to kind of talk about is, content chaos. So what is that? Some of you might not have heard this term before, and some of you may have, but almost everyone has experienced some form of it in some way. And for those who do not know what content chaos is, it is often described as information that is either poorly managed or disconnected from business processes that negatively impact employee efficiency, customer service, and revenue. And analysts such as IDC and AIM have done multiple studies and have identified some alarming statistics surrounding this well-known problem. What they found was that employees on average waste roughly about 26% or 13 hours of their work week with general document issues. Now, this can include issues surrounding finding information, versioning, and duplication. And they also say that 41% of employees are not confident that the information they're accessing is accurate. And that 59% of middle managers miss important information or deadlines because they simply cannot find what they are looking for. So you can see from these statistics and numbers how much of an impact this can have on a business and why it's so important to have a solution in place. And for us to properly solve these issues, we must first identify what the causes are. So one of the main reasons for content chaos is simply that a lot of companies are using rigid and ineffective legacy solutions. As these companies and their data evolve, they end up outgrowing their current solution. Another big cause are information silos that exist internally. They say a business has at least roughly around 3 or more solutions to manage their information, and in most cases, none of them can really communicate with each other. A common example we've seen in many instances is where companies will have all of their data spread across multiple solutions in a very fragmented way. You know, I was on site not too long ago with a customer, and they had 4 different databases of information due to low user adoption rate. And really what was happening was they tried to push the selected solution to other departments, and they got pushed back because it was either not meeting that department's requirements or they simply didn't like how it worked. So they had dynamics for their sales information. They had like something like network folder for general documents. They had SharePoint for their marketing materials, and they were using Dropbox to share all of their information to their vendors. And really what they were looking for us to do is take all of that data and really unify it and make it consolidated into a simple UI and give everyone access to all of their information. Another big component or contributor to content chaos is document versioning. You know, imagine how many times you search for information, and after you finally found what you were looking for, you ended up sharing it with your team or customers, you realized that it wasn't the most up-to-date version. Also, the lack of transparency or workflow automation. So companies with no workflow to automate manual processes that are both time-consuming and labor-intensive, such as approval processes or change requests, can also create content chaos. Couple that with no visibility to easily identify what stage of process that workflow is in and who's responsible for that particular workflow state. It's also a major issue. And lastly, companies not securing confidential information. So imagine employee files, medical records, contracts. So a lot of this data is not secured properly, and that can lead to content chaos as well. So how does Mfiles fit in all of this, and what do we do to help solve these issues? Now, our motto at Mfiles is we want to change the way that the world manages information. So first and foremost, we are a very different kind of ECM solution. The first major difference is that we provide a completely repository agnostic experience. So you would use one system to access all of your information, and that can include both structured and unstructured data, no matter where it resides. It can be your accounts and dynamics. It could be your documents such as invoices, proposals, or CAD drawings and network folders. It could be customers info in NetSuite. It really doesn't matter where that information lives. Now, secondly, we are not a rigid system, but rather a platform that is highly configurable and scalable. So what this allows us to do is work for almost any industry and use case, but also provide customizable solutions focused on quality management and compliance. We help customers of all kinds with various regulations such as HIPAA and FDA, and our solution is CFR 21 Part 11 compliant, and we ourselves use Mfiles internally for quality management, document management, and HR, and we as a company are ISO 9001 compliant using our own system. Also, everything in Mfiles is saved once, and we automatically track version history and changes with an audit trail, so users no longer have to worry about what they are accessing is the correct version. They can see what version it is on the front end. They can also see who made changes and when. We also use metadata and AI technology in a very unique way, making information management very simple. And our workflows that are built into the system are very easy and intuitive and highly customizable in Mfiles. And users can have access to all of their data on multiple devices in the cloud, on-premise, and hybrid. We also support all major browsers, so Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari, and we also have a native app for iOS and Android for your smartphones and tablets. So talking about connectivity and integrations, here's just a small sample of some of the databases in the past that we have integrated with. But Mfiles API can virtually connect to any database with a SQL backend. So this can include Dynamics, SharePoint, Salesforce, NetSuite, Sage 100, etc. We also recently launched IML, which stands for Intelligent Metadata Layer. And what this does, it allows Mfiles to connect and access any information in various databases with no migration needed. And because we have a native app, you can even access those connected databases on the go through your smartphone or tablet. But really what makes Mfiles work efficiently is how we leverage metadata. Almost every solution in the industry uses metadata in some form or fashion, but typically only use it for discovery and dissemination. We use it to drive everything in our system, from applying automatic permissions on information, to kicking off workflows and assignments, to determining storage and location, and applying retention and disposition schedules. And because of metadata, Mfiles is capable of storing information based on what something is and not where it's stored. Now, why is this important? Now think about it. Your information will now be saved and easier to find because of the fact that we're storing things by what. So anytime you think about something that you've misplaced, you always forget where you left it, but you always remember what it is. And that is why we put more emphasis on what something is in our system. So here is a perfect example of how this process of saving information using this process is more effective. So I have a proposal for a particular customer, A&A Consulting. It's associated to the hearing aid project. Now the question is where do I store this document that not only makes sense to me, which I can easily find, but also for others to find as well. This is not always an easy task. Depending on your role or what you as a user identify as key information, it might be the customer or it might be the project. If I'm in sales, it might be the customer. If I'm a project manager, it might be the project folder. That makes more sense. With Mfiles, you do not need to make that choice. You simply tag both the customer and the project, and now you can access it either way. This ensures that the information is always where users expect it to be. Now, we try to make this a lot simpler when it comes to metadata tagging. Now, there's a lot of companies like Google and Amazon that are leveraging AI technology to make everyone's life easier, and we are doing the exact same thing with ECM. We recently purchased an AI company called Apprento, and we're now using that AI learning to help Mfiles users easily classify unstructured content. We do that in a way of metadata suggestions and then also adaptive classification. So here's an example of how it works. Document is saved in Mfiles, and the AI analyzes the contents and layout and provides an intelligent suggestion based on what it found. Because this looks like an invoice, it will suggest to the user that this document is indeed an invoice. Once selected, the metadata card dynamically changes and suggests other appropriate information about this document, such as vendor, and then also person or contact person. And lastly, companies can take business processes such as approvals or SOPs and simplify them with our flexible workflow feature. So in this example, a draft is created and is approved or rejected by the content manager before it can be published. Once published, the SOP is reviewed periodically to ensure it's up to date and meets quality standards in the future, and controlling content in this way is required for a number of different companies like pharmaceutical, medical device companies, biotechnology companies to comply to possibly FDA requirements or other requirements in that field. And during these workflows and at various stages, Mfiles ensures that the appropriate notifications and assignments are applied to the users who are responsible, so users can always track the process with complete transparency and get notified when these actions take place. Now, Mfiles is a platform, but we also have the ability of kind of constructing very specific use cases, or I would say templates in our system. So we do have one for quality management and compliance. And what we're able to really accomplish with a lot of these is, being able to manage things like creation and management of SOPs, or training compliance, processing audits, managing suppliers, database management, etc. So this really concludes the slide portion of this presentation. So what I want to do now is start going into the actual product demonstration. So as Jonah had mentioned, that you are on listen only mode. So if you do have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type those into the question box. So first thing worth noting is that Mfiles is tightly integrated into Windows. So when I actually launch my File Explorer, you'll see that I have an M drive located right below my C drive. So what this allows users to do is give them the same experience as if they were saving information into an external hard drive or their desktop or a Windows file folder. So not only do we have an integration into Windows, but we also have an integration into all the Office products. So you'll see that when I have a document on my desktop, I can simply just right-click on the document, and I can add to Mfiles this way. I can also, if I'm working in the document, you can see that again, we have an integration into Windows Office products. You'll see that there's a Mfiles tab here. So I have this proposal 7780. It's for this particular customer, 3DT. And there's some information like proposal and project for hydraulic cylinder. So what I want to do now at this point is save this into Mfiles. So what I'll do is simply just click Save to Mfiles. And what that will do is prompt metadata card. Now, as it's coming in, it's analyzing this information and creating suggestions as it's looking at this document. So for me to dictate, what this document is, you'll notice that as I type in the class, it's going to automatically start providing a suggestion of what that document is, and then also provide suggestions for who the customer is and project listed on this document. Now you'll notice that it's not asking me to save the information in a particular location. Everything's going to be saved in the Mfiles vault. And then automatic permissions and security are going to lock this document down. So you'll notice that as I'm selecting 3DT and hydraulic cylinder, it's going to give me a prompt that permissions are going to automatically get applied to this document at the time of ingestion. Now you'll notice that I'm not just selecting, words to tag, like say a customer or project. This is actually living data in Mfiles. So if I click on 3DT, for instance, what that will do is launch Mfiles and show me 3DT, the customer, in our solution. Now, a lot of times customers are pulling this information in from another database. It could be their ERP system, it could be their CRM system. And in this case, it's pulling information out of Salesforce. So what I could see is not only the customer information like their address, their phone number, a website, but I could actually drill down and get a 360-degree view of this information. I could see follow-up information like contact people that work for 3DT. I could see documents associated to this particular customer, and then also a project that they're managing as well. So a lot of information right at your fingertips just simply by tagging information. So once I'm actually done tagging it, I simply click create, and that will actually bring that document into Mfiles for later retrieval. You'll also notice that proposal title is automatically created, and what we're doing here is we're creating a concatenation of a number of different metadata properties to create a universal naming convention at the time of ingestion. So since I already saved this document, I'm not going to save it again. So I'll just go ahead and discard the changes and close this out. But what we're going to do is launch Mfiles and show you the various ways to find this document now that it's been ingested. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply go to my Browse dashboard. And you'll notice that we have what we refer to as common views. Now you'll see that, again, we manage structured and unstructured data. So not only am I managing my documents, but I can manage projects, and I can also manage customer information as well. So if I click on the customers, you can see a list of all my customers. Now, this particular find, I'm looking for that proposal. So what I want to do is click on Documents, and here again is where that choice happens. Now, since I actually tagged it with the customer and the project, I have the choice of finding it either way. If I was in sales, I could go by customer and class, go to 3DT, go to the proposal virtual folder, and see that document here. Once I find that document, I could select it. I could take a look at the metadata. I could see information like the version number, the created date, last modified date. I could preview the document as well. But then also, if I was, say, for instance, another user that doesn't identify this document by customer and class, maybe I'm a project manager and I identify this by project and class. So I could go to the project and class virtual folder, go to the specific project, go to the proposal virtual folder, and see that exact same document there. So the idea there is that this document is not living in a specific folder, but it's being linked to many different folders in our system. And it can be done in an infinite number of ways. So really it's about choice and giving you the flexibility of finding information the way that you would, as a user, would want to find that information. So we have what we refer to as common views. These are views typically set up by admins based off of roles or departments that a lot of users would share in our system. But we also have what we refer to as My Views. Now what My Views does is it gives users the flexibility and the ability to create views specific to their role when they log in. And this doesn't really affect anyone else. So if I go in and make a few views for myself, this doesn't really change how Chris or Joanna or George accesses views. This is only specifically to me. And what you can do is get very specific on the information that you want to see. So for me, I wanted to see my documents by projects, but only show documents for projects that are active. So I created that view. So if I look at the hydraulic cylinder project that I'm working on, you can see that I have a number of different documents associated to that project. I have a CAD drawing. So if I select the CAD drawing, you can see that there's metadata specific to CAD drawings. And then when I click on preview, I can actually preview a DWG in our system. So I go to the layout, zoom in. See, this is a drawing of a top cover. But then you also get the other documents supporting it as well. I have this purchase invoice. I also have the proposal. And then you can have that 360-degree view here. So you'll see that this top cover is associated to this project, but it's also associated to this part. So again, this part is not a document, but rather structured data in our system. There's some other views that you can create. So I have some other examples just to show you. So possibly if I was a manager and I wanted to see all invoices waiting for approval, you can construct a view for that. So you can see all the different workflow states for these particular invoices, who they're assigned to, the customer, the date modified. I could also create a view that shows invoices that have been approved already. So maybe that's a view that I want to see. So anyone can create views specific to them, and there's no limitation on what views you can create. You can also do a sort of contract management in this as well, and we do have a separate template for that, but I won't get into that too much, but you can do contract management in our solution. And I've constructed a very easy view to kind of show that contracts that are coming up for expiration within 60 days. Now, this is all dynamic. So if I had a contract that was 61 days out and then tomorrow hits, that document would automatically populate in this view. So you really have this kind of dynamic thing happening where you're actually using these views to go find information in the system and pull it back. We also have the ability, as we have mentioned in slides, to connect to different databases. So in this solution, we have SharePoint and a share folder connection in this scenario. So if you'll notice, if I go to my desktop, I do have a network folder share on my desktop. So you'll see that I have a different folder structure here. So if I hop into projects, for instance, and I go to bill of materials, you can see I have a number of different folders, and then also various document types in this folder. Now that is replicated exactly in Mfiles, so I could actually peek into these folders without having to access them through the network folders. So with one UI, I can go straight to the projects. I could go to the bill of materials and see all the information in that network folder. So you'll notice, again, when I select the proposal, I could preview that document as if it was living in Mfiles, but really it's in the network folder. So again, really kind of focused in on providing a repository agnostic experience. So I showed you one way of kind of doing a browse to finding information. Now let me go in and show you another way, which is very popular, which is the search function. So anyone who's ever used Google search could use Mfiles search. It works exactly the same. So if I was to kind of type in, say for instance, A&A Consulting, simply just type in the customer, what it's going to do is find any information in the system that has the word A&A Consulting in it. So you'll see that it's not only going to search for that information in things that live in Mfiles, but also retrieve things that are in my share folder. So not only can you browse into those connections, you can also search across those connections as well. You'll also notice when I scroll down that there's other things that it's picking up. It's picking up assignments with the word A&A Consulting. It's picking up the contact people that work for that particular customer, the customer field electronic signatures associated. So a lot of information is being pulled. And when you look at the filters, this is where you can really kind of segment the information to a specific object type. So if I was only looking for documents per se for an A&A Consulting, I could segregate just the documents. Or maybe if I was just looking for the customer record itself, you can actually segment that. But then you can also segment the location of what you're looking for. So let's say, for instance, I'm only looking for the documents with A&A Consulting in the share folder drive. So you can get very specific with that. So to kind of go back to the proposal that we just ingested, the proposal 7780. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick search for that. And you can see that by just typing in some keywords, I'm going to turn off this filters, you can see that I could quickly pull up that proposal that I was looking for in the system. And because we go in and we OCR the contents of the document, you can pretty much type in anything that you want because we're doing a three-way search. Basically, if it's looking for that information in the title of the document, it's looking for it in the metadata, and it's also looking for it in the preview of the document. So I could have typed in anything. I could have typed in 3DT, the customer information, and found that document that way. I could even use, say, for instance, a part number. So if I was to, say, copy this part number into my search, I can find it that way. And you'll notice it's going to highlight anywhere it sees that term, and it's also going to retrieve it with a score. So this score is being determined by how often and relevant the information or the keywords that we're typing in search and where it's found in the document and how often. You also have the ability of getting very specific with your searches, very similar to how you can get very specific with creating views. I can go in there and create a very specific search. So if I was looking for contracts that are effective through a specific date range that I've created, you simply just create that search criteria and make it go. Another thing that's great about our solution is not only can we find information really easily, but sharing information is really simple as well. So let's say, for instance, I found this document and now I want to actually share it to someone. It's as simple as right-clicking on the document, and I have a number of different options here. So if I was to share this proposal, but I wanted to convert this proposal into now what is a PDF, I simply just select send as a PDF by email. And what that's going to do is launch my Outlook, and it is going to create a PDF version of that document. Now, it doesn't really change the document in the system. All it's going to do is convert it and then email it. You also have the ability to send hyperlinks. So typically for us using Mfiles, we send a lot of hyperlinks. And the reason why we send hyperlinks is not only is it a lot easier, but it's a lot more secure. So if you'll see if I create an email, we have the option of sending a hyperlink. And the hyperlink is going to give the option to the user who's receiving this to click a desktop, web, or mobile. So if you remember, we have 3 different access points to our solution. So if someone was traveling and they wanted to see this document, they can click the mobile app. It automatically launches their mobile app and shows the document and points it to their system. So if you see that if I click on this document, it's going to go straight to document in our system. Now, to talk about security, the great thing about this is, if you happen to send this link to somebody who's not supposed to receive a document, maybe it's confidential information, or maybe they share that link to someone else. If that user does not have access to see this document, if they click that link, it's going to go to nothing. So it really ensures that information is really secure in our system, and that also applies to the searching function as well. If they did a search on a document, they're not supposed to see it, it won't come up in a search. So to them, it is as if it never lived in our system. You also have the ability to go in and send public links. So if somebody's not an Mfiles user, you can simply send a public link to someone, and what they can do is they can download it from a download page. So this is great for sending very large information. So if it's a really large CAD drawing or possibly a movie file or PowerPoint presentation, it really makes it easier. But also what's great about that is because we're sending links, if this document changes at any point from now until the time that they access it, they're only going to see the newest version. So what we do in our system is when you double click the document, it prompts you, do you want to check out or read only? Now, if I check this out, what I'm essentially saying is I'm actually making changes to this document. So if you look at Mfiles and what it looks like to other users, if someone else was accessing this document, like say I was modifying it and Chris was accessing it from his side, he will see that there's a checkmark box letting him know that this document was checked out on this specific date by this particular user, who's me. So he knows that when he double clicks the document, he's only going to get the option of reading only. So if I was to go in here and change anything on the document, maybe a date, for instance, and then maybe deleting something, I'm just going to do something random. Once I'm done with my changes, I simply just close out the document. It's going to prompt me, do I want to save the changes? I go ahead and click yes. And now what you'll see is it's going to be promoted to version 3. The last modified date is going to change. And to other users, they'll be able to see that on the surface. Now, if I go in the system and see someone has changed something and maybe I want to see what they've changed, I can easily just double click the document, go to read only. And what I could use again is that Mfiles ribbon to do a comparison. So if I go to Mfiles and I say, let's go and compare, I could choose the previous version of that document and click OK. And what that's going to do is just run a quick comparison to those 2 document versions. And from there, what it'll do is it'll give me a summary over here to the left and show a detailed version on the right with the comparison over here. So you can see exactly what was changed. If I didn't want to authorize that change, maybe I could right click on this and just go to the history, and I can easily roll back to that previous save. So you don't really have to worry about overriding documents. We always track the version. So I could always just roll back to that previous version. And what it's going to do is not eliminate version 3, but supersede it with version 4, which essentially is version 2. So now when I look at the document itself, you'll see that it's back to its former state. So one last thing I want to kind of show is kind of talk about workflows. And when you have a workflow, you'll see that I get a notification that there's a particular invoice that I need to access, and it's waiting for checking. So you'll also see a notification through emails, but you'll also see that we have a dashboard for assigned to me. So this is very similar to, tasks that you're supposed to do from day to day. So you'll see that I have a task for a purchase invoice, and you'll notice when I select it, it gives me the option to do a state transition. So if I want to, I could go send for manager's approval. And what that will do is it notifies the next manager in charge to take a look at this document and review it. So you'll see that on the metadata, it'll list who the document is assigned to in this particular workflow state. I assigned it to myself just so I could walk through the full process. So I'm going to click on Approved by Manager. And now for this particular workflow state, it's asking for an e-signature, which is essentially my username and password. I'm going to type that in, sign that document, and now when it's completed, it's going to automatically disappear from my task list. Now, we also have the ability of doing contracts as well. So you'll see that I have a contract here that is waiting for approval. So what I want to do is want to approve this to be signed. And what that's going to do is take this document and convert it from a Word to a PDF, and it's going to send off for signature. So we actually have a DocuSign integration in our system to where you'll see that right here, it converted that NDA test document to a PDF. And now if I select sign digitally, what that's going to do is it's going to email the signee to sign it using DocuSign. So if I go over here to my Gmail, you'll see that now I have an email that asks me to sign a document. I can review that document. It's going to open up DocuSign. I'm going to continue, and I'm just simply going to review the document, click sign, and then click finish. And what that's going to do is it's going to push that new signed version of that document up into Mfiles. Now, this typically takes about 20 minutes for it to sync. So I actually have a version of this document that's already signed, so I want to show you what that looks like. And we have this thing called favorites. So I favorited this document, and it's very similar to bookmarking a document in our system. You also have the ability of saving or, not saving, but following a document, which will give you alerts if a document gets changed. So in our system, we have a price list that feels like it gets changed constantly. I follow that document so I can get notified when it actually changes. So, here's an example of this document being re-uploaded back into Mfiles, and what it does is it creates a multi-file document. So not only do I have the signed copy in our system, but you also have the summary of the copy as well. So kind of like the signature manifestation. So that's pretty much all I wanted to really kind of show on the general side of the document management. Now's a great time to hand this off to Chris, and he will kind of present the QMS and compliance components of our presentation.
All right, thanks, Mike. I will switch on to my screen and.
Excuse me, Chris, before we move on, and Mike, I just wanted to, we have some questions, it looks like, on the screen right now. Can we maybe go over that for 5 minutes,
Sure.
specifically to Mike's point? Okay, great. All right, well, we have a question here from Pat. Does Mfiles have the ability to read handwritten text?
So handwritten text for a lot of solutions out there is going to be a very difficult thing. We can do pretty much any block letter text recognition, but really what we need to do is kind of work with a capture solution to identify that. So there are some capture solutions that can read handwritten text. We would just leverage that technology and kind of use a connection with that. So I would say natively we do not, but we can work with other systems that do.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And Pavel has a question. Where does the final managed data live, in the cloud or in the original location?
So when you actually pull this information into Mfiles, at that point it's living in Mfiles, whether it's going to be on-premise or cloud. So it's really about what deployment you have, but once you put it into the system, it's going to be in the Mfiles vault from that point forward. Now, if you're asking a question about, like, say, for instance, how we have these connectors, the connectors are just pointing to, like, say, your databases. So if I'm pointing it to a network folder, that information is essentially living on your network folder still until you decide that you do want to promote it or possibly move it over into Mfiles.
Okay, sounds good. And Pavel says he also assumes that the files get copied to your cloud.
Correct. So you can actually have, like, say, for instance, a hybrid. So if, say, for instance, you do have a on-premise version of Mfiles, you can have the contents replicated into a cloud as a backup, but on the cloud deployments, they automatically get backed up. So if a server goes down or whatnot, you always have access to your data. And by the way,
Okay.
this is something worth mentioning
important.
is that we use Microsoft Azure for our cloud services and repositories. So it's very secure and very well-known system.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's a big concern for people, right, is backing up their data, their most valuable asset. And Pat actually had a couple more questions. She wanted to know if users, can users be managed, i.e. like limited access and permissions, and then deleting docs, those types of things?
Definitely.
And then she also wanted to know, will it store emails?
Yes. So that's a great question. So users, we have 3 different types
Pat
of
always
users.
has good questions. Sorry, Pat always has good questions.
we have named users, which have the ability to do everything, but the admins can put a lock on what they can do in the system. So they can restrict them from editing information, seeing information, changing, deleting information. We also have concurrent users that have the ability to do everything in the system. And again, it's all driven by permissions. And a lot of that we can pull in from Active Directory as well. But concurrent users are typically shared users where multiple people share one concurrent license. So you can have anywhere from 4 to 20 to 50 people sharing one license, depending on how often they are in the system. And then we have a tried and true read-only, which is essentially exactly as it states. Somebody goes into the system, they can only view information and participate in workflows, but they can't change information or create new information. Now, to get to the question that you have about email, this was something that I wanted to show, but I wasn't sure if I had enough time. But we ingest emails very easily, right? So a lot of companies do work in email, and what we want to do is free up that information so everyone can have access to information if it is appropriate. So you'll see that I have a confirmation of order here. Now, I could have this Mfiles tab and ingest it that way, but what we can also do is have different watch folders for email addresses. So a lot of companies say, we get a lot of confirmation of orders, we get a lot of proposals, we get a lot of invoices. And what we want to do is have companies or vendors submit emails to that particular email address. We want Mfiles to automatically pull that in. We can definitely do that. So what happens on the back end, and I'll kind of do this in a manual process so you can see, is by just dragging into the confirmation of order email watch folder, you'll see that it automatically identifies that there's an attachment and an email. So it's saving both. It's also going to classify automatically as a confirmation of order. So again, you can have one for invoices, you can have one for proposals, you can have one for a number of different things. But what's really interesting is it's looking at who the sender is. So it's looking at this email address and looking into our system to verify that that email address belongs to Daniel Hall and that Daniel Hall works for this particular customer. So it automatically tagged it with the appropriate information, and the user simply just clicks create, and that's all they will need to do in the system. And you'll notice that as they're ingesting it or pulling it into Mfiles, it creates this little nice Mfiles bar to let the user know that now it lives in Mfiles. So if they were to delete this email, now they can access this email, and using the enterprise search in Mfiles to easily associate this to a number of different projects or customers, so that way it's easier to find. Also, if somebody else is CC'd on this email, if I pull it into Mfiles and then they try to pull it into Mfiles, they'll get prompted that this information already lives there, so they don't have to actually pull it in. So it really restricts them making duplicate copies of the email as well.
Wow, that's really amazing. You know, I can't wait. I actually didn't mention this, but we're going to be implementing Mfiles into MXO, and I'm so excited. That is just really cool because I'm always searching in my inbox. All right, great. Well, thank you for answering all those questions, Mike, and
Sure.
thank you to the audience. Those were really good. So we'll take that now and move on to Chris, and then we'll still have more time for questions at the end.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to do a quick overview of what is our QMS, or quality management system. Basically, it's built on top of everything that Michael's already shown. Mfiles' core product now has the quality management system that kind of sits on top of that and adds a lot of functionality that's very specific to managing quality documents, whether they're SOPs, other procedural documents, but also then managing training records for your employees. So we're going to see some HR management related to the employee aspect. And then finally looking at some audits and tracking of audit findings and things like that. So essentially the full story here is, as you are creating your documents, storing them with the metadata, making it, of course, a whole lot easier to find and manage that content, is the last thing that we want is that content really goes dead in the system. We want people to be aware of it. We want people to be using it. We want people to know what that content is. So that's really where the training aspect comes in, is making sure that people have read and are familiar with the information. And then if and when we happen to go through audit type situations, and those audits could be for a lot of different reasons. It could be from regulatory agencies. It may be customers wanting to audit you. It may be suppliers wanting to audit you. So there are a lot of different areas where people may just want to get a look into the business to see what's going on, how is it working, who knows what, things like that. And so Mfiles is going to give you a way to track and manage all of that and be able to prove exactly what has happened. So just to show you a few of those examples, one of my views here is current docs. This is specifically looking at some of our SOPs that are in place currently. And as Michael was showing, you know, once I go into a view, there could be a lot of different ways that I could find certain documents. So even just looking at current docs, you see I could look at them according to a department, a process, a site, and so on. So I'm going to go into department and just look at my operations department. And within the operations department, I just have a couple of sample documents here that you can see. So some of the examples Michael was showing really might be all that you typically will need from a metadata perspective. You know, a lot of times we will say that if you have anywhere from, say, 3 to 5, 4 to 7 metadata properties, that's going to be plenty to be able to easily find what you're looking for and have that managed within the system. You'll see on this particular document, of course, we have quite a lot more metadata. This metadata is actually being used, though, to help drive a lot of other processes. So metadata in Mfiles is not just used to help find it or to search for it, but it can actually be used to drive processes. whether it's putting it into a workflow and making sure that it follows the correct path in the workflow according to what metadata you've assigned. It could also, as you see right here, we can assign documents to departments and sites and processes and so on. We can also have people assigned to those sites, processes, departments, etc. And by having those pieces of metadata, while you may or may not necessarily be looking to find the document according to those particular properties, although you can, as you saw, I came into looking by department and the operations department, but this will help direct the documents to where they actually need to go for the people to be aware of them and to learn those documents. You'll also see some other metadata that's been captured here is major versions. So this is like a 1.0 version. So the QMS module will enable you to track 1.1, 1.2, 2.0, and so on as you may be making changes to your SOPs. You can see effective dates that they were put in place, who approved them. We do have electronic signatures within the product. Michael was showing DocuSign as a method of sending documents out to be signed by external people. These electronic signatures would actually be for people electronically signing within the organization. And so, we can still preview the documents within the product, just as you saw on the examples Michael was doing. You can see they can be watermarked, stamped on the left-hand side. Those electronic signatures can be put onto the document at the end. So you have full records management of that particular procedural document. Now, if we expand underneath this, you'll also see everything else that is connected to that document. So in the same way that you saw with the document management that Michael was demoing previously, you can see that a lot of content can actually be connected to documents and other pieces of information. One of the things that you'll see under here that's particularly important with these documents is the learning rules. So as I was saying, when a document can be specific for departments, processes, sites, even countries, and so on, you can see a lot of metadata properties here. It's just a choice of which ones you would use at a particular time. You can see that in this case, we are directing this document to this particular department. And as I said, we could have been more specific about other locations or ways to kind of divide it up. And then we'll even give a period of time that we want to allow for these employees to learn this particular document. So we'll give them a grace period of 2 weeks and let the learning, once they've completed the learning, it will be valid for a year. Now what that means is if someone goes in and reads the document and says that they have learned the content of the document, if someone works here for 5 years and they read a document 5 years ago, they're probably not going to remember much of it. So that's why we can put this validity period on here, is to say, we want people to be relearning, recertifying on this information annually so that it's current in their mind. Also making sure that they have seen the most current version. So if you think about your processes and procedures, they could also be changing over time. And so while I may want to set a valid period on this particular one, if I were to revise this document and create a 2.0 or a 3.0 version of it, I'd want to make sure that people are now aware of that latest version. And so what Mfiles can do is cause their current learning to expire and force them to learn that newer version of the document. And so if we look at the training records right here that are also associated with that document, we'll be able to see particular users within the system, and you'll see that these training records are in a learned and valid state. That means that that particular person has actually said, yes, I read the document, I've learned the information, and so they're checked off as learned and valid. On the other hand, we could look at someone else, and I think we've got somebody else in here with a different status. Yeah, here's one that's overdue. So we can allow them, you know, a certain period of time to learn the information, but if they don't, then it will automatically flag them as overdue. If that year passes, it will then flag them as expired. So basically the system is taking care of all of this for you by allowing it to manage the state of that learning, so that you as the manager don't have to manually take care of all of that. Once these time periods pass, it will move them into the correct state automatically, and you can have views within Mfiles to automatically, you know, to be able to come in and very quickly see, you know, these are the people who are current, these are the people who have expired, these are the people who may be overdue, and allow you to address those issues more proactively, rather than, let's say you were to have an audit and you're finding out after the fact that, oh, we have a lot of people who have not trained on what they needed to be trained on. In this way, we can stay on top of it much more easily. So having said that, let's take a look at the audit aspect. So from this standpoint, you know, we've said that you can have documents in here that are well managed by the system, and those training rules are then put out for the individuals, so that then we can track whether or not they have learned the information, been trained on it. You can also hold training sessions. Here in my recently accessed by me, if I show you that document again, you'll also see trainings here that are scheduled. So aside from people coming in and learning the documents themselves, kind of a self-learning, we could actually hold a class like this and teach that document to people, and so we can knock out a lot of people all at one time. So it will also help you manage the classroom training aspect as well. So the last thing I wanted to show here very quickly is the audits portion. If you had any ongoing audits, and again, you can see your audits in a variety of ways, by supplier, customer, year, etc. If I just go in and I wanted to look at all of my, let's just say audit full list. So these are the only current audits that are going on right now. If I expand under this audit, we'll see the other content that's associated. Notice that you can have documents associated with that audit. So these might be findings, document filings, anything that you create related to it. But especially what's important here is the audit itself can be created with dates, who's conducting it, why it's being conducted, what state, what status it's currently in. But then if there are any audit findings, like saying right here, you can see missing training evidence, wrong SOP version. You know, those are the kinds of things that are really not going to happen when you have Mfiles in place. These would more so be like audit findings that were discovered because Mfiles was not in place. And so with these audit findings, we can now address those particular items. And you'll actually see then, if we expand underneath there, that we have some CAPAs or corrective actions in terms of how we want to address those issues. So what you can see here is that all of that information is being kept within Mfiles, so that from an audit perspective, we could go in and say, you know, we had an audit last year, these were the findings, this is how we address those issues, and now we're having another audit a year later. We can then track that progress and see that the issues we have last year were in fact resolved. We're not seeing those findings again. If we were seeing something like that, we would be able to then have the documentation to back up and prove exactly what has happened. So I know we're running up on time. I'll go ahead and wrap up, but just wanted to show some very specific examples around that from a compliance standpoint, and kind of how those records can be managed within that type of environment. So Joanna, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Yeah. Yes, boy, that went by so quickly. I think that was such an interesting session. We'd love to get your feedback on other topics that you would like to see. We're going to have a schedule that's coming up where we're going to be doing more webinars, and we didn't even get to the tip of the iceberg here. We have a lot of things on contract management. We have all kinds of topics that we want to go over, but we will put that out and be sending it to everybody. In the meantime, you can, if we can move up to that slide with the contact information, guys, and where you can request a free trial or a free demo. So one of the things that we want to do is, if this is something that looks really interesting to you and you think that there may be an opportunity for you to incorporate Mfiles into your organization, we could also set up a free trial or even give you a free demo or a free trial so you can use Mfiles within your business and see if it works for you. You can contact George Mira directly. You can also look at the link that we have here on the slide, mxotech.com/Mfiles, and learn a little bit more there. And then you could, of course, always call me directly. I thank you all for joining today's webinar, and I look forward to having you join again for upcoming future webinars. Thank you.